talking about a series called Interface, and I have a book version. I'm just going to hand it around. I'm going to show like 30 images today, and there's about 80 in the book version. So I grew up in the suburbs, and when I kind of got out in the world and went to some cities, I was so intrigued with the dirt and the grime and the interesting people, and I started doing a kind of photography like street photography, pictures of anonymous people in the street environment. Never really asked permission of people because I kind of had my shy face on. And I did that for many years, and then at a certain point I thought I had my clever face on and I could be even a more interesting artist than a photographer. So I started doing these sculptures, and this was in the early mid-90s when cell phones just came out and people started constantly interacting with these little objects. So I started making these sculptures with, they were like boxes with holes in them and little buttons and little lights and switches. And I called that series Interface because it was things people were interfacing with, and there was a whole new way that people were interfacing with technology and with the world and communicating. And then I started, after making a bunch of those, I started thinking that I just couldn't help myself taking pictures of the type of things that I was making sculptures of. So I started taking some photographs again, and of stuff like this, and then without really trying, stuff like this especially, and then without really trying, I realized that I had gone full circle, come right back to taking pictures of people on the street, because all of my pictures had faces in them. And in fact, the name of the series, Interface, has the word face in it. So, so I kind of embraced that idea as I got back into photography. And I started exploring why I was taking pictures of faces, why I hadn't noticed it before, why it was so ubiquitous. So that became a journey where I was exploring street photography in the sense that all the pictures are of objects out in the street, but I wanted to have a different kind of take on it. I wanted to have some of the feeling of street photography, but have a different approach. And there's a few ways I've been approaching that. So, so one way is that my pictures are about the nature of human perception. In this case, it's the way your mind sees faces everywhere. And there's one scientific idea called periodola that is the term for how the brain tends to find significance in vague or random things, like finding animals in a cloud is a common example, or seeing a face on Mars is another common one. And in this series, it kind of combines that idea with something that Carl Sagan first hypothesized, that human beings are hardwired via early evolution to identify the human face as a survival technique. So there's something in our brain that is both for the need of being able to recognize other people, but also just being able to recognize things in random stimulus that kind of comes together here. So really this is, and it's not just for us as viewers, but it's also the people who make these objects. You know, this is all basically industrial design. And you know, this is for example, a light that's a small light, about maybe 3 inches diameter, that's on a stairwell. And so it's a metal plate with there's a light behind it, and you can see the sort of glass clear area, but you know, when you're looking for the face, you can really see the face, and it's got so much personality. So to some degree, this is about what are those industrial engineers who are putting two objects and making them symmetric and some other object below them. On what level were they making a face without even thinking about it? On a very small scale, most of the pictures are objects, but also on a bigger scale too. So in this way, it's my photography is about how the camera can make the invisible things visible, so that the process in our brain and the brain of the designers. So there's, again, the more of these you look at, the more you start really seeing them everywhere, because they're out there, but of course it's more about that they're in your head. So I've really enjoyed that process, and it's been photographically a challenge to avoid certain kinds of images that I see all the time. So like one kind of cliche thing that you would see all the time are the electrical sockets in the wall, where there's two dots and something underneath it. So there's variations on that. In Japan, there's a lot of where I travel often. There's a lot of trash cans that will have two round holes for recycling bottles and cans. So I do take pictures of those all the time, but I restrain myself from using them too often. I'm always looking for the faces out there that have the most personality. And the more I work on the series, and the more that I present as a group, the more I'm able to include images that are a little less obvious. Even an image like this, where what are the eyes, or the two keyholes, are they the lights above the slot? You can kind of find a few different kinds of faces in there. And in some of them, the faces are a lot harder to find. I've been shooting this series for quite a long time, about 10 years now. And I have some in the book that are in the neighborhood here. And like I said, some are in, a number of them are in Japan, and some of them are in all kinds of other places. So that's mostly what I wanted to say about it. Do you guys have any questions?
I really enjoyed the textures that I see in your photographs. I mean, as a street photographer myself, I do go out sometimes and just look for different textures and things that you wouldn't normally think would be aesthetically appealing to make a photograph. So I really enjoy that about this series you have.
Kind of think of it as like the skin of the face. Like this is kind of a stubbly kind of face that has a stubbly beard or something.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever come across anyone that doesn't see the face? Or have you ever shown these photos without prefacing it, or just showing them
I think
people don't see it?
Some of them are more obvious than others. And when I'm showing them in an exhibition, I'm trying to show at least 9, sometimes more, sometimes a few less, because if you only have 1 or 2, it doesn't really have the impact, and it's not about exploring psychologically. Because a lot of my friends and people who have seen more of this work, so many of them tell me, oh, now I see them everywhere. Lots of people send them to me. So I think people get it pretty quickly, especially, again, something like this, where you can see it pretty easily. But it's funny, a lot of it is in how I frame the photograph. Because like this is a call button for an elevator. And usually someone's kind of focused on one half or the other, because there's an elevator on either side of this one. But when you just frame it right, it can bring the face out. And then here's one. This is kind of one of the last ones I usually present, because it's a self-portrait. You can see me in both of the elevator buttons for this funny elevator that only goes to the 6th and 7th floor.
And all of these are shot digitally?
Yeah, they're all digital on a variety of cameras over a number of years.
Do you see an end for this project? If you've been going for 10 years, do you want to keep shooting still?
No, yeah, I keep shooting. I have lots of new images that I haven't edited and put together from the last few years. And so I want to do, this book was kind of just a prototype, so I want to expand the book, make it longer, but, focus on editing sort of the emotional content of it, because, again, a lot of these faces have some kind of emotional quality. I also have a fantasy of doing a big installation inspired by the Family of Man, where there's lots of, because that was all about portraits, so having something at big portraits in different sizes hanging. Do you know that? Have you seen that exhibition?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't see it, but I know of
Yeah.
it.
Do you ever ask permission now?
Well, most of these things probably wouldn't say yay or nay.
But are there situations where you do have to approach someone and say, can I take a picture of, do you notice this is a face and can I take a picture of it?
Like the one of the two.
Fatigaboo things?
Yes,
No.
Just.
No, usually I'm just, it's usually a kind of a passing moment, and usually, well, again, in this series, there's very few people, but I still have my shy face on. This was another one where I kind of, there's a face, if you kind of turn your head sideways, there's two lights, and the red light is kind of a mouth, but it's kind of almost like a pun on the face because it's a hand. And this one also, this is ubiquitous in Japan, but I've shot a whole bunch of these, and there's something about this sort of dimple of this green weed in the smile of this one that I liked a lot. Thank you.